If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today because we bring the discussion with the sources.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Walk with me through the cellar door.
The storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Oh, welcome to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight on this very cold and windy night in Michigan. Tonight's a kind of a special episode. We have a former guest joining us tonight, a friend of our show. And in a second, we're going to bring him on, and he's going to join us to talk about Black History Month as well as his future run for Michigan House. So please welcome back to the show, Christopher Banks. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing quite well, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. Is it warm in your house at least? Is it at least warm?
Well, it's about 68 degrees right now, so it's warm the way I like it. I don't like too much heat, but it's good.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I keep my house at. You know, I don't like anything more than that. I sweat to death. You know.
Yeah. I got a brand new gas log fireplace insert about 3.5 feet to my left right now that we bought just because we were like, man, if power goes out, I need to be able to pipe it in. And as long as DTE or consumers doesn't start their facilities on fire again, so there's no back pressure in the gas lines, I'll be able to keep my house warm. But everybody seems to have prepped because I saw people buying generators and losing their minds at Home Depot this weekend, but I didn't see any major stuff or crazy outages or anything. So I'm guessing everybody or most people are doing okay out there.
I would have guessed the same thing, but a lot of people are preparing because anytime we have ice storms come about, that's whenever we have real issues.
Yeah. And in Zeeland, we got lucky. We prepaid. Our neighbors were burying their electrical lines, and so they came and said, hey, it would be cheaper for us if more people did this down the street, and Zeeland's going to eventually mandate that it happens. So we got our electrical lines buried for $300, and a bunch of people in the neighborhood did the same thing too. And so it was really nice because when we have these things, I only have to worry about the power plant, or a pole.
Yeah,
right.
That's how Kentwood is too. Like if you do anything in Kentwood, you got to bury it. So, I mean, it's insanely expensive. And there's like the taxes for your real estate and the number of millages is pretty intense. But I don't know. I'm okay paying taxes to have a nice, solid infrastructure. I mean, that seems like a good thing to put my money into.
Well, yeah, because it's necessary. You want to make sure that you have great connections. And obviously, you have that in Kentwood because you are paying quite a bit of taxes there.
Oh my God, dude! My business is in Kentwood too. It's so brutal.
I think you guys have the highest amount in Kentwood, in Kent County, don't you?
It's up there. It's up there. Wyoming has some pretty interesting areas too. The industrial sector and commercial sector gets hit in different ways that are pretty ugly. Like personal property on your real estate and then personal property on the stuff that you own inside the building it's a mess. So I mean, it depends on if you're a big enough company to pay someone to keep track of everything and find all the loopholes, and you're good. Like I talked to a assessor. Yeah, I know. I talked to the city assessor this year before the tax season started, and the guy was like, you guys are screwed. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, you're too small to pay a guy all year long to make sure that you get the best return possible, but you're too big to be tax exempt. So you're just like in the worst place. So I said, you're basically punishing small, moderately successful entrepreneurships. And he goes, that's the way the rules are written, man.
Yeah. It's always a setup.
And my life is the punchline. I'll take it.
Yeah, pretty much. You're not the only one. We're all in there, unfortunately. We don't want to be, but we are there.
Well, and speaking of changing tax codes and helping the state of Michigan, Christopher Banks ran last year for Michigan House of Representatives, and he's announced his bid early. So tell us a little bit, I guess, just for the audience. So you were back on our show. God, it had to been almost October, I think, when we had you on.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about your, I was going to say your presidential run, and who knows, maybe you'll just change it, and we'll get a presidential run out of this, and then we'll be like the first show. We'll be like, yep, hey, he didn't announce until the summer, but he's getting on board.
Yeah. Well, it's about 21 people right now that's going to run for president, I believe. I read
1,000?
Yeah,
21
people have their hats in the ring currently right now. A lot of people, of course, are behind Bernie Sanders. I think he raised like $1 million in less than an hour or less than 4 hours or something like that. I read.
Yeah, it was 6 million in 48 hours last time.
Yeah. It was some astronomical number. So, if that's an indication that he's in it to win it, I would be glad personally to see him there over Trump, any day of the week. But we have some other candidates that's strong as well. Corey Baker out of the East Coast as well. He's considering running as well. So I'm not ready to run for president. I'm just trying to, get a state seat. I want to start, there and get my feet wet, and then maybe I can move on to Washington. But, first things first, I really want to make an impact here in West Michigan. I've lived here for 27 years plus. And, we've made changes, but we're still moving at a slug's pace. I would like to see that move a little bit quicker. We're becoming a more diverse area, and we need some different representation. Like I told you prior in our meeting in October, our interview rather, I'm a working man, and that's who I want to represent is the working man, because that's the driving force here in the state of Michigan. Is the people that are working every day that's paying these taxes and they're not really benefiting from them. And I want to see that happen. We need better infrastructure, like Hannah talked about, paying more taxes there in Kentwood. We need better infrastructure as far as like transportation with people, working different shifts, having to get back and forth to work, not without cars, can't really afford insurance. The cost of living being as high as it is in comparison to what the jobs are paying on average here in our area, it's still an imbalance, and we need to see more of that happening. And then the community is starting to come together. As a matter of fact, on I think it's February 26th, I'll be going to Grand Haven to a commissioners meeting where they'll be having a diversity position that they're looking to start here in Ottawa County. So, like you said, we're moving in the right direction. We're moving a little bit too slow, and it takes people like you and I to really, speed the process up. Because, I didn't win. I won 34% of the vote, more votes than any other Democrat that's run for the seat. So I was excited about that. I just need the other 17 points, because at the end of the day, the gentleman that won, Bradley Slaw, every time I showed up in a forum where he didn't have really much to add other than, I'm all about business and we need to make sure that the businesses are thriving. But what about the people that are working in the businesses?
Yeah.
Obviously the businesses have to thrive. We know it's part of our economy, but at the end of the day, if people can just make ends meet, what is the point?
Exactly. And it's funny because the company I work for, supposedly all these tax breaks came, right? Mm-hmm. And our company was super excited. They were explaining how it's going to benefit our company. And I now have access or sit on a council that, they're training us to be future leaders of the organization. And the discussion about what we came down to, I raised my hand and said, where'd all that tax benefit money go to? And nobody could answer me. And it's like, well, did nobody track this? Well, I think we did. Yeah, you did track it. What'd you spend it on? Now in fairness, our company, we had to update our office. Our office was really, really outdated. And, we acquired some new business and different, and we had to pay higher tariffs this year. So, there's that as well. So,
you can thank the president for that.
I know. Well, and that's what I told them. And it's kind of funny because I've never worked for a company before that has at least been in the middle, like a centrist. And, even if they do vote Republican now and then, it's just funny because, like the owner of our company was on, LinkedIn and Twitter blasting the president because of the tariffs. Like, do you understand what you're doing to the nation? Do you understand how much money is in 3PL businesses? And you're now hitting all this money. And it is just kind of funny because I've never once worked for even a small company that's had a even moderately liberal owner. So
yeah.
But anyway, enough about that gibberish.
Yeah.
Christopher, this is like the trifecta of Chris's. Like we could just call the show the 3 Chris's today if we wanted.
I like that.
The 3 Chris's.
That's what you should call it right now. Just
are we all wise men? Are we?
Well,
I'm going to
tell that it wouldn't be wise to call yourself a wise man. Time will tell it. Mm-hmm.
There you go. So to begin the episode, we always have an intro segment, and today we're going to do our local charity of the week. So the charity that we had chosen for this week was the Book Industry Charitable Foundation. And I don't know, has either of you heard of this local organization?
This one's it's Scholastic is tied up to it, right?
They are not Scholastic, but they are tied to it. Yeah.
They connected to like the Scholastic stuff at all, or are they completely separate from like how it goes into the schools and everything?
They're completely separate. This is a completely separate thing. So their goal is, as a nonprofit, essentially is to get out a wish of bookstore employees to establish a fund to help their colleagues experience unexpected financial crises. They're dedicated to assisting bookstore employees across the United States in their time of need. So essentially, these are helping local bookstores inside of Michigan. They are specifically working with people, with same-sex partners, minorities, and they're trying to help continue the book industry even in a very declining paper society, I guess is the nicest way to say it, right?
Well, but book sales have gone up the last couple of years. It's been a surprise that like the ebook stuff had a big spike, but books have seen a pretty heavy duty run. It's still one of the best things you can buy as gifts for a lot of people. And I mean, if you think about every single person that's been kicked out of the Trump administration has got a book out. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So, so these guys aren't really getting into the school so much. They're supporting the small business world, which is something that I really do like. Because, I mean, there's something about going into a small shop with dirty books and that smell that smells like a little bit of a library. There was a really cool woman on Instagram who she finds things inside of used books, like place marks, and she found stuff of it was a person who had a poem that their great grandfather written in like 1890 something, and she found the family and they actually published it because it had been addressed to getting published and stuff. So it's like those kinds of things, that small business world that's it's not the sterile mega bookstore thing. There's some heart and some feeling there that helps kind of make society and like local communities what they are. Yeah. And so that this would be something that would be supporting that, which is really cool.
Yep. And they have a one of the unique things about it is they have their diversity task force, which specifically is made up of not just white people and not just straight people, and they specifically go out of their way, to offer internships to lower income and minority businesses to help again increase the visibility of different organizations in the community. And as Christopher was talking about earlier, Michigan's still got a ways to go. We are definitely not on the forefront of, the social movement here in West Michigan. Wish we were, but we're not.
Well, like I said again, we, I don't want to sound negative. We are definitely moving in the right direction. We're just being slow about it. I think, that saying "out with the old, in with the new."
Mm-hmm.
It really applies here in West Michigan because you have people moving in from not only different countries, but they're also moving from different parts of the country here. And it's a good thing. Primarily, it was predominantly white here, and it still is. But you have a lot of people that are more conscious of the fact that there are other people than the Dutch, you know, or, you and I'll say the Dutch because when I moved here to Holland, there was a saying that they said if you weren't Dutch, you weren't much.
Oh
And
man.
yeah, and they would laugh about it, but they were serious. They meant that. Not most of them. And personally, I'm African American, and I'm from the South, originally born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. And so, for me, it was diversity at its best because I grew up in a predominantly African American community where the only dealings that I had with whites were they were in some position of authority, where it was, a teacher in a school or a police officer or some sort like that. But I didn't really have any real interactions with Caucasians, and so that was my norm. So when I moved here to Holland, it was a shock, you know,
Yeah.
at the age of 16, coming here, and I was like, oh my goodness, if I see one more Dutch dance, if I see,
The
know,
shoes. It's the
if I
shoes,
see
man. That's
one
what
more
always
guy
gets
wearing
me.
khakis and he's supposed to be dressed up, and I'm like, where the heck is your suit? You know what I mean? It was just, it was a culture shock to me. And when we would go to, a game and not have simple things like what I was accustomed to, a pep rally. A pep rally was like what you would call a dance-a-rama. It was the most popular music that was going on at the time. The band was actually playing that instead of Chopin,
Yeah.
and I was just like, okay, we gig into, NWA and whatever else was, hot at the time. I know I'm dating myself, but you know what I mean? We were doing the and all that
Yeah.
and having a good time as young people. And I think, like I said, when I moved here, it was foreign. And so, I had to get, acclimated to the way things happen here. And it was very boring. And then I made the best of it, but now I know a lot of my friends and stuff, they were into hip hop. They were listening to the music. The parents weren't, but they were, and so that generation, our generation, is really that generation of change. Now we have a lot of millennials that are disenfranchised. They're not really engaged. They believe that everything is a waste of time, and they're much wiser than we are, they believe. And, you know, and so they don't have a lot of tolerance for a lot of things, and they're not willing to, get on board with what needs to happen. What needs to happen is, you have to have a plan of action. Nothing happens overnight. It takes time. It took time for it the other way to go, and it's going to take time to debunk it, but again, I'm ready for it. I think we can do it. Black History Month, for example, Black History started as a week. you know, it wasn't a month, it was a week, in 1926. And by the 70s, 50 years after it started out as a week, it became a month. So, you
Yeah.
know, when we think of, Black History Month, we always think about Dr. King, of course, which was our finest civil rights leader, but there were so many others that were a part of it. Dr. King did not do it, by himself. It took the Jesse Jacksons, the Ralph Abernathy's, to help the Andrew Youngs. It took those individuals to help hold him up and support him. And a lot of those individuals are still here. And I think the biggest thing for, Black history in particular, is it needs to be a part of the curriculum across the board. We're always teaching white history. Christopher Columbus came over in 1592, blah, 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 blah. you know, um,
Yeah.
you know, uh,
Even that is problematic.
yeah, the Dan Roths of Holland, that's so important. And I'm not trying to take away from them, but what I'm saying is there's more to it, to American history than just that.
Yeah.
And so, Black history should be a part of American history curriculum. And that was one of the things that, I really wanted to see to push forward on a state level. We need to open our kids up. They need to know about George Washington Carver. They need to know about Booker T. Washington. They need to know about Sojourner Truth. And it's not, people are not interested, they're just not aware. I think that when the month of February comes, we just really hear about a whole bunch of people. Oh, this lady, I just found out, I can't remember the lady's name right now, but it'll come to me in a second. This woman is accredited as making the first home alarm system.
Yeah, we talked about her a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. And I personally just found that out a week ago myself. you know and I think it's really sad because sometimes we don't think about who did this or who did that. The things that we know were things that were taught to us, and then we took an interest and really researched it for ourselves to really make ourselves more aware of it. But you don't think about, okay, someone made the light bulb, but who made that threshold, so to speak? We don't think about a threshold, who created a threshold. Some do, but most don't. And the things that we do know is because of what we've been taught. And so I think it's important that we teach it in schools.
Yeah.
The woman's name was, just real quick, the woman's name is Marie Van Britten Brown.
Okay.
I just did a quick check online because we talked about her. We basically just had a couple of things of I think it was 10 people who invented things that don't really hear much about. And then the education thing, it definitely brings that in, is that like you get the whitewash version and he's in high school. It's like I did not get anything that was really in depth. And I mean, the American people need to know the shame of our history as well as the accuracy and the facts of it. And the children need to know that we did some bad things and then we're still atoning for them. But we only get the cleanest, the most sterile version, and that's something that we can't talk about certain things. So I would love to see a little bit more variety, and I mean I guess a little grittiness and a little bit of the actual fact and even the darker parts, and when it comes to that educational level, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I told you back in October, Chris, that when I was growing up in the South, it was right after everything, after Dr. King. I was born like 7 years after he was assassinated in my hometown. And, my own personal family history was one of my great uncles was a part of the sanitation workers there in Memphis. And he was telling me about, how he made $1 an hour, and
Yeah.
I was like, $1 an hour, I can't even imagine $1 an hour. And he had, at the time, I believe he had like 8 children to support plus a wife,
Oh,
and so when they carried those signs said, "I am a man," it's the idea that I can work and pick up your garbage and serve you well and keep your city clean, but I can't make a decent living. That's unacceptable.
yeah.
And simply because I am Black, you have determined that I don't deserve anything. And that's the real shameful thing, Chris, Hannah,
Yeah.
is that, the shame of it is the mindset that someone that is non-white does not deserve better. That's the real shame of America for me. Like I said before, I told the Democratic Party and I told everyone that I stood before, and I'm really here to thwart that idea. I'm not here to take what's yours. I'm here to receive what is mine. It's a difference. You know,
Yeah.
I work for mine. I don't beg you and plead with you for your things or kick in your door to take your things. I want the opportunity make my way, and that's what a lot of African Americans are doing, and that's what they've been taught, from their parents. Show respect. But a lot of Caucasians, you meet them and they believe that they're superior to you, and that's the shame. you know, me being deemed as a boogeyman because that's where that story comes from. The black man walking around, he's scary. He's out to rape you. He's out to, rob you or somehow take something that's precious from you. That is a propagated lie. Yeah, there's bad people, black, white, Asian, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
There are bad people. But to cast a huge shadow over a group of people, that's the real shame here in America. And when I see hats that says "Make America Great Again," I always say, when exactly was America great?
Mm-hmm.
When were we great when Christopher Columbus and the rest came over out of England? And from the history that I learned, they were thieves. Okay,
And
they
murderers.
stole land that was
Yeah.
not theirs. You know what I'm saying? Discovered a country where there was already about 12 million people. So how do you discover that? I don't understand. You know, and then you learn how to survive in said land, and then put those people on a reservation, which they're still on today.
Mm-hmm.
Now
And
that's history.
exactly.
These are the facts. you know,
Yeah.
And then a lot of the African slaves, we talk about the African slaves and how they became slaves. Some of them were sold into slavery from tribes in Africa. That is true, but not all of them. You know what I mean? There were a lot of people that were just stolen, taken by force. And the majority of the slaves did not come actually to America. They came into South America, and the islands in between. You know, these are the real histories. The ugly truths of America. And I think, it's one thing to put a band-aid on a wound, and it's a whole nother thing to actually perform surgery with the goal of healing the wound. And I think that's where we need to get to. And we can start by, like you and I, we're the three Chris's trifecta here. We're talking
Yeah.
about the real stuff, that's actually happening. And I'm not ashamed to talk about it, because the truth of the matter is I wasn't a slave. Neither was my mother or my grandmother, or my grandfather. And so we weren't slaves, but we were treated like slaves. And then in a lot of cases, right today in 2019, I'm treated like a slave. Like I don't belong in this room. I don't belong. I shouldn't be having this conversation. Who am I to do thus and so, when my white counterpart can do the same thing and it's okay? Those are the things that are not acceptable. Those are the things that I cry aloud and spare not. And I don't. I'll take the criticism. I'll take, the negative reputation given me, because I'm a straight shooter. You know what I mean? And so, I don't blame you guys and say, well, you owe me reparations because, my ancestors were slaves. The country owes us. When they gave the Japanese reparations for imprisoning them after Pearl Harbor was attacked in the 40s, you
Yeah.
know, they've given reparation in some kind of referendum to others, but still African Americans, we don't deserve anything. We got 40 acres and a mule. But if you do your history on that, American history, the majority of those people that received that, it was taken from them by erroneous laws.
Mm-hmm.
We called it Jim Crow. They came in and they took the 40 acres and some more from them and made them sharecroppers. This is the real history that we should be talking about. And it shouldn't be just in February. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
we should be talking about it like I'm mindful of this, and that's where we're trying to get everybody to a consciousness to be awake to the fact that these things are happening, because I don't know what it's like to be a white man. I don't. You know what I mean? I'm not white. You have to tell me what it's like to be a white man, and vice versa. You're not black. You don't know what it's like to be a black man on a day-to-day basis. We have to be conscious of others and be willing to listen. So that's why I came here tonight.
Well, thank you. And I think it's very important, because I was doing some reflecting this week, and we talked last week about this, and I was doing a little reflecting just to my childhood. And I understand that society has technically progressed since the 90s, but I don't feel it's progressed that much. And you were talking about Christopher Columbus earlier, right? You know how long it took me as a human to even go, you know what? I'm ashamed of him. I don't want this. Why are we celebrating him? These things. And then when you think about Black History Month, and we sit here and we talk through this, what are the highlights? Yeah, okay. We have Rosa Parks, we have MLK. You hear bad things about Black Panthers, but the more research I do about Black Panthers, the more I actually can sit there and say, well, I don't understand as a society why we aren't having these conversations more often. If you want to prevent violence, then we need to start treating people better, because at some point, people are going to act out and become violent. I mean, we see a resurgence in, Nazism right now. And, people gave everybody a lot of shit for wanting to, I guess I'll just make a swearing episode, but for wanting to punch somebody. But at the same time, do you understand what they represent? Like, at some point, do you get to lose your freedoms if you're a hateful, horrible individual who wants to murder people? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't offer these. We offer a fair trial to serial killers, but we don't go, hey, you know what? They got a point. Maybe if we decrease the surface population here, folks, I mean, it's silly. And, going back again to my childhood, I sit here and go, how much did the school systems miss out and continue to miss out that none of us, in these white dominated schools get taught? And I don't know if you know this, but I have no idea if the curriculum inside of a more minority heavy district actually teaches different things or not, or if you're forced to specifically teach the curriculum that you're given.
Well, I can say, like I said, I went through Memphis public schools up until middle school. I came here and attended high school. And, I had part of it was Detroit public schools. So I could speak about those three school systems in particular. In Memphis, we did not have Black history curriculum, added into elementary or middle school. It was the same thing as it is now. In February, it'd be mention of Booker T. Washington or some sort, some of those people. And then when I moved to Detroit, before I came to Holland, I lived there briefly in high school. And I actually had a African American literature class, which was the first time that I had ever had that at Cody High School there in Detroit. And it was quite interesting because I got to learn about poets, African poets, and African American poets as well, not just African American, but African poets as well. And it was great to be able to study some of them and to read their, writings and whatnot. And I remember when I moved to Detroit, I really had my twang was really strong, my Southern accent. And a lot of people there, which was predominantly Black, they would tease me. They believed everybody in the South lived on a farm and, got up at 4:30 in the morning like Chris is going to have to do in the morning. And, but instead of taking your dad to, hospital, we was milking cows and, gathering eggs and,
Yeah, well, in Motown, they
hoeing the field and, and all this kind of stuff.
yeah.
And, and I was like, dude, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is larger than Detroit. And they just couldn't understand that concept because they hadn't been outside of Detroit. And so, and I just looked at them like the idiots that they were, you know, and I moved along. But I did so well in that class because a lot of the writings were like in broken English. So I was able to, read it because people I knew, I grew up with spoke like that, like go on away from here, stuff like that.
Wow.
And come here, stuff like that. And so it was pretty good for me to really, excel in that particular class because, like I said, they were people I knew. And so with me saying that, when I moved to Holland, of course, it was the same old, white history, you know what I mean? And we'll mention, and I got some Dutch history because I had never even heard of the Dutch until I came to Holland, So, it was a lot of focus on the Netherlands and what was happening around here and, and how this community has grown and how it's kept itself sufficient, the pride of the Holland Dutch,
Yeah.
But, yeah. But, for me, I came with a different perspective, and teachers and friends alike, they approached me and asked me, various questions about things that they wanted to know. And, I would share with them because they were curious. And I think, that's what really sparks our learning is curiosity, right?
Oh, yeah.
You just don't want to delve into something that, that is detrimental to you, obviously. But again, it's just a matter of you hear something, you seek something. When I hear about Sojourner Truth, what about Sojourner Truth is so special? Well, this woman was fearless. She, put her life on the line to help as many people that wanted to be helped. And I think that's important because that's the storyline that I personally get from her, and that's what I take away from her is that, it was worth it to her. It was important to her rather for her to reach back and not be a crayfish in a barrel,
Yeah.
She got out, obviously,
Yeah.
but she realized that she needed to stay on top and reach down and pull somebody else out,
Yeah.
and that's important. It's a process to it. And so again, for me, Black history is my family. Black history is my friends. And us continuing with the excellence that our predecessors started, and I think that that's another shame of America. A lot of non-whites, and it's not just, a lot of people that are not Black, and it's not just whites, it's others too, and we need to talk about that as well. When you go into an Asian-owned store, you're being chased around like a criminal, and you're the one that's in there to support their store. But then a white counterpart can come in and they're not under surveillance as much. That's a problem. And a lot of times when you got crooks, they work in tandem like that. Well, dude, you white, you go on in and steal everything, and I'll be the distraction. You know what I mean? It's a sad commentary, but it happens, a lot. And we need to talk about that. It's
a big thing in Kentwood where I'm at. Like I came from south of the city area where I went to high school in Caledonia, which is, basically the beginning of farm town. It's turning into a little bit more of a modernized suburbia because of all the expansion in Grand Rapids. There's been a lot of brand new houses coming up. But when I was there, it was farm town. It really was, a lot more of that. And one of the things that I've noticed from moving into the Kentwood area, the area is incredibly diverse and it's really nice. But in the gas stations, there is a sign at every gas station, all kids take your backpacks off, leave them at the edge of the door. And they treat the majority minority children differently, then I
Mm-hmm.
never in one gas station in Caledonia and Middleville and Cutlerville, any of the smaller towns, the farm towns, the mom and pop gas station shops, was there ever a thing, which would be majority white children, was there, leave your backpack there, leave your backpack at the door, do not, and they would call you out if in the gas stations near my home. They'll say
Mm-hmm.
something. I've heard them reprimand children for it. And it's just there's a difference in the way that people are treated. And if it's not so much that they understand exactly what they're doing, but those little microaggressions, those little things that you grow up with in the environment that you grow up in, that changes how you interact with people in society. And as someone who is very interested in learning about these things, I become more and more aware, which is one of the things why we wanted to have you on the show. And we love learning new things on Cellar Door Skeptics themselves, being skeptical of things, is that these are really important things to kind of find out. And I would love for more people to spend just a few minutes in there these children's shoes. I always tell this one story. My new neighbors that moved in last year are Dominican and Mexican, and they invite me over all the time. Come over, have a corona, have some food. They're having a birthday party or something, and I sit at the table sometimes, and I will speak when spoken to, but everyone is speaking Spanish, and I have to
Right.
wait until someone wants to talk to me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
unable to talk to any of these people. All of these people here, who most people would look at as, not as American as me, having been born here in a lot of cases, but I actually know less languages than them. If you listen to me, I'm a monoglot. I would technically be considered less intelligent because they have control over two languages and they're living and working in a new society. Like, this is impressive stuff. And everyone should have that moment where they're the minority, where they get treated a little bit differently, and maybe give
Mm-hmm.
you a perspective. It's like Chris and I have had little bits and pieces of that. But as middle class, lower middle class white guys, it's not very tough to be us. That's kind of what we like to
Right.
talk about.
I can easily get along with someone, even if I don't agree with them, if they're honest in what they're doing. What I don't like is when people are wishy washy. You know what I mean? One day you're this way, and then the next way you're a totally different way. Who are you? And where
Code
did you come
switching.
from? Yeah. And like I think I may have mentioned part of this to you, Chris, in October. I'm not sure if I did, but I'll say it again. Um, but one of the things that, one of the distinct differences that I noticed of people in the South versus people in the North, as far as when it comes to whites, the majority of whites, not all of them, but the majority of whites in the South, you knew where they stood. If they were a racist, they let you know, I'm a racist. You know what I'm saying?
They didn't
But
care. They were openly proud.
they were openly proud because they felt comfortable, you in what they were doing. The law was on their side. They had control of things, and that's really what it was about. It was about control. And they didn't mind letting you know they didn't like you. You
Yeah.
know, and that was it. But when I moved to the north, there were a lot of snakes in the grass. People grinning in your face, and all they hate you simply because you're black, not because they know you. you know, uh,
Yeah.
not because you've done something that was detrimental to them. It was just simply because you were black. It's almost like what Dr. King said. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, but it's a great one. It's a documentary of the last year of his life. It's called King in the Wilderness. It's on HBO now if you guys want to watch it.
Okay.
But Dr. King said it like this: when he came to Chicago, he said Chicago was worse than Atlanta.
Yeah.
At the time in 1966, 67, I believe it was 67. Yes, when he came there, it was worse in Chicago the racism was than it was in Atlanta.
Wow.
And the reason being is because he said when he would go out and march and whatnot, you may have 100 hecklers or so, but when you went to Chicago, they were tens of thousands. And this was supposed to be the North where it was much better.
So
you know,
yeah,
Yeah.
I have a question.
yes.
So, do you think that the reason there's more people that come out and protest in the North is because of the fact that people have to hide it, and they feel that they did their little bit for society to get them their ally card is kind of what you would call it, right? They're like, yep, I gave an attaboy, I donated some money, therefore,
or
why
voted for
coming,
Barack Obama or something.
yeah, why are you coming here and telling me that? Do you feel that it's that type of mentality because they aren't secure in their racism, and inherently probably some of these people are very racist. They just don't like to be called out, because all the white people in that area say, "Oh, I'm not racist. You're not racist. We're accepting, blah blah blah." Do you think that's a possibility that's why that is like that?
I think that is a definite possibility. That's the reason why it's happening. I think the other reason is a lot of people are not exposed. Like you said, if I grew up in a predominantly African American community, a lot of people here have grown up in a predominantly white, and they are white. And there's just what you're accustomed to. And then when things start to happening, change, most people don't like change. And it's difficult to adjust to it. So I think that's a big part of it. And then a lot of them in their minds, they've been taught from a child that they are superior. So that means that everything else is inferior.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it too, because if you think about it, this is another part of the civil rights movement in particular. If you study George Wallace, for example, you guys can look this up on YouTube, but George Wallace was the governor of Alabama during the civil rights movement. And one of the tactics that he used to convince the whites in Alabama to fight against the civil rights movements was fear. The fear of blacks moving into their neighborhoods, the fear of blacks moving up on the economic scale and outdoing them. And their target, who their focus group was poor whites.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't affluent whites, it was poor whites.
And I think what Trump used.
Oh, that's exactly what he did. It takes somebody like a comedian like Dave Chappelle to come along and make a joke about how he lives, in obscurity in a sense in Ohio, because he's a rich black man known for his comedy, and he could easily live in Hollywood or anywhere, but he lives in Ohio. Okay.
Yeah.
And he makes this joke about how he drove up to the voting poll in his Porsche. And he drove past all these poor whites, and they were all in line, with their faces with scowls on them, basically voting for Trump. And he laughed and said, "Good, because he's for me and not you." And it's ironic. Like, now you're against me as a black man, basically. And I'm paraphrasing because he tells the joke more funnily than I am right now.
Yeah.
But the point he was saying that he got you dead set against me so that you can vote for him. When in actuality, he's only for those that have money, and I have it. You know what I'm saying? And you don't. And he's going to use you to get what he wants.
Yeah, they always say that people, the greatest thing that the elites and the richest people in this country ever did was convince the middle class that the poor was coming for their money.
Exactly. and that's really what it is. Because, and I make this statement, and let me be clear, I'm not rich or affluent by any means. I'm a working man. I clearly am. And I understand that there's really only two classes of people. It's either you're wealthy or you're working.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And we like to, I make $250,000. But if a person is making $250,000 a year, more than likely living in a $500,000 home or more, they're driving Mercedes, BMW, or something that's really, high costing. And the money that they're making, even though it's good money to most, But in the grand scheme of things, they're in the same place as anybody that's making $35,000 a year, because you're not living within your means, you're living above it. And most of us, we have to live above it because things are so expensive that we can't afford. I mean, I just bought an iPhone today. I don't want to go out and pay X amount of dollars for an iPhone. I put it on a payment plan. That's what most people do, you know, because at the end of the day, you don't have $2,000 or $3,000 to throw here and throw there just like it's nothing. We have to be more wise with our money. Would you guys agree?
Oh yeah. I am so cheap it hurts. My old baseball coach used to say that if he gave me a Buffalo Head Indian nickel, by the time I was done squeezing my pennies, the Native American would be riding the buffalo. It was just like I'm so I go crazy over tiny bits of money. Like the $250,000 example you gave on there, the person's got a expensive house, they got a big mortgage, they got an expensive car, they got a high car payment on that one. The people who are doing the things right is the ones who basically use their right investments. And if they do what they're doing right, and their disposable income at the end of the year is comfortable enough so they can cover their retirement and be settled and live there at that level, I mean, you really can. What you're doing is you're removing that worry. There's a little bit of stress that's got there, and that stress will kill you. It really will. It will kill you. And so like the talk about, the quality of life and some, just removing the stress of trying to make, ends meet, cover the food, cover all the bills, keep the kids happy, and get them into college, all that kind of stuff. If you remove that and you pay people a living wage to the point where if they spend their money well, they can, basically work for the rest of their lives. They'll work for their money, but they don't have to worry about the existential crisis of just being able to survive. It changes the quality of life. And that's the only difference that people like us want to make, is that it's not so much we want to give people money so they can live opulent. If they're smart, they can live a quality life. And that's really what I'm looking for to get. And with a lot of things that we hear about this is, what you said with Trump basically utilizing the poor whites to battle against the minority classes in our society. These are the kinds of things that when you don't educate people right, you don't educate them about all of the different intricacies of history, you can do that. In really well-educated societies, you can't manipulate the people like this. There is an important tactic to dumbing down the people in the country, and it's very frustrating. And I'm so excited to teach my daughter when she starts getting a little bit older about all this kind of stuff. And I wish more parents are like that.
Well, you know what? You definitely have the right mindset, because those that are educated, they see it, and they're doing everything in their power to thwart what's coming. And like you said, we've talked about it to nauseam, the dumbing down of society. That's why you don't see a lot of the tax bills that the bills that are really going to make our educational system in America across the board more robust. We talk about it on the, we talk about it on the surface, but the reality of it is when you see a lot of the public systems within the state even being neglected, where there is a higher minority group there. And then they're going to focus more on the affluent. Betsy DeVos is doing a fantastic job in the education system of making sure that she dumbed down society. She's right here in Holland, and the truth of the matter is she's super funding these PACs and whatnot to keep control of West Michigan and Michigan across the board, to really push that agenda of dumbing down society to make America great again by having less educated people that are more mindset. Their mindsets is really more focused on work until you die. You know what I mean? And live in a stressed society when the quality of life could be here. We could have better education. We could be a more thriving country when you include everyone and not just certain groups. Because the truth of the matter is a lot of white America is disenfranchised just as well as the minorities. That's the truth of the matter. But the thing of it is we're divided. And that's the part where podcasts like these and other forums that we have of us coming together and starting to talk to one another, we realize we have more things in common than not.
I love it. I love it.
And I think that's a very important point that a lot of people miss. And I'll be honest, I will say that when I started to become a little bit more progressive, some of the things I had to relook at that I did in my past life. I guess not past, right? Before I was a Democrat, when I was a conservative individual. Okay.
There's a young person in a very conservative school that directly controlled your size and shape of your brain. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of, a little bit, yeah. When I started to come out, that was one of the first things, you feel that guilt and you want to shut down. And I've had to, that's personally for me, one of the biggest struggles is forcing myself out of, well, I'm not a failure specifically. I had a lot to learn. I have a lot more to learn. And the difference is if there's no way that we can communicate, I can admit there's certain things my parents taught me that were incorrect. I had friends that I no longer hang out with because of the fact that they're racist, and it's sad it took me this long to find out. But if society is just going to shut down, all we're going to do is we're going to have siloed, communities again. And that's, to me, that's the disenchantment I have with some of our public school system, is because I'm seeing that to some extent, and I don't know how to fix that. Like some of me says, well, I should run for local government, but why do you need another white guy in here telling you to do these things? We need to be supporting other people that have different backgrounds than me. At some point, I need to become the support piece as best I can versus trying to push my way into the limelight. And that was always a hard sell for me because I'm a pretty aggressive person. Anybody who didn't know that.
Well, I'll say this, Tanner. Well, the good thing is that you recognize, because we can't help what we were taught. We can't help that. What we can help is what we know now. I always say, it's like the Bible talks about, when I was a child, I did childish things. And when I became a man, I put childish things away. That's a good principle that I personally follow. And the simple reason is because no one is perfect. We're all striving to be perfect, or we should be, but we're not perfect. And they can only teach you what they know, what's ingrained in them. My parents can only teach me what they know. I can't be upset with them about what they taught me. What I can do now with what I know is take what I know and grow from there. And it's again, I keep saying it. I don't want to sound like a cliche, but it's really about consciousness. That you have to be conscious of the fact that there's something that is better than what you know. And like Anna, you said something about, us being wise men. Well, I said, and for us not to be wise, we don't declare that we're wise.
Yeah, buddy.
It needs to be someone else's perception of us, and then we need to grow thereby. When you're patting yourself on the own back and saying how great you are and how you this and that, we all need to encourage ourselves, but it becomes narcissistic when we believe it ourselves to the point where no one else is anything, and that's in all groups. It's some type of ism that has been imputed in us, and we spend our lifetime fighting that to become better, and for me personally, like I said, me moving to this area really opened up my eyes to a lot of things, because the truth of the matter is, and I'll be the first one to say it, is that there's racists in every race. You know what I mean? Whether you black, white, or whatever, it doesn't matter. We all, well, not we all, but most of us have some degree of racism in us. The truth of the matter is, that's my opinion. But again, when we're aware of it, I don't say, well, I don't like white people because they, took everything from my ancestors. Like I said earlier, Why would I be upset with you too because of what someone else did? What I'm upset with you about is what you do,
Mm-hmm.
and what you should be upset with me about is what I do, you know, and we need to bring it into the now. And Black history for me is more so about what we're doing right now. The foundation has already been laid. Dr. King had a dream in 1963. But in 1967, and that was just 4 years later, he was saying that his dream had become a nightmare. Okay.
Mhm.
And these are things that we don't really talk about,
Yeah.
but it's true, because seemed like the more he tried to do better, to do right, the worse things got. And so when you say, I don't know what to do, Chris, I understand that frustration because we all are there, those of us that want better. But the truth of the matter is we have to stay consistent. That's how we get better. We start by realizing where we're wrong and correcting it. And then secondly, those who we are responsible to teach, we need to teach them what we know currently. That's how you do it. You start in your home with your wife, with your kids, how you treat people. That's where it starts. And then every now and then we need to take a stand and say, hell no, we're not going to have it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Hell yeah.
And mean it. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you have to be radical. Sometimes we're too relaxed. Sometimes you just got to jump out of the box and become a square and not a circle. So you won't be rolling everywhere. The only way you're gonna be moved, you have to be picked up and moved. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes you have to be the standout. You can't fit in because it's comfortable.
Yep.
And that's where we're at.
And that's and as we wrap the show up, that's extremely logical. That's like the most logical thing I've ever heard, I think, to some extent, right? At least this quarter. But when we talk through these hard issues, and I have a friend and he has made some very racist statements, right? And he consulted me and he's like, I don't understand this. He's like, I don't want a school to mandate we should have to learn about Black history, blah blah blah. And he's like, look, I live in a minority neighborhood. I have Black neighbors. They all like me, so I can't be racist. And it's, like you just sit here and you go, okay, I don't agree with you. And then he's like, and look, you live in an all white neighborhood. I mean, how many Black people live in your neighborhood? And it's like, okay, hold on a second. Now you're conflating issues, man. Like, are you willing to admit that, hey, maybe you said something incorrect and you should correct yourself? Because if you are, then let's have a conversation. But if you're just gonna deflect, you're not open to change, and you obviously have made a decision that you're not racist. And I think as soon as somebody makes that decision, kind of like you were saying earlier, there's a little bit of racism, and not just white people, right? And I think that's true. The difference is if I, as a white person, if I'm not going to go around calling out white racism, I shouldn't go around calling out minority racism, because if I can't address it in the majority that I live, I shouldn't be addressing it in another. I mean, for example, there was a gentleman that is now being accused of creating a fake hate crime, right? He's all over TV. But yet earlier, how many other people, such as, I can't remember that lady's name, and that's a shame of me, but there's a lady that called the cops on Black people having a picnic in the South, right?
Oh yeah, I remember that lady.
Right. And without activists or people going, that's wrong, stop, what is wrong with this lady? She's illogical. How many more people had did that? I think there was an article that said there was 25 other people within 1 month that did the exact same thing, but only one person made national news. But here we have one person being accused of creating a fake hate crime, and I don't think it's even confirmed that that's true or not. But we have one person, and everybody wants to dismiss hate crimes. That's racism right there.
It is racism at its best, and and like I said, so you're right on point in what you're saying, Chris. the truth of the matter is again, you recognize it. That's great. This friend of yours that, he's saying his kids should be taught Black history, basically. How dare you come and tell me what should happen in my school system? Well, what if I went into that same school system and said, out with Christopher Columbus and all this white history, and let's just do Asian history? You know what I mean? What if I said that? Then it would be a big issue. How dare you mandate this? This is American history and this is what's right, because what you know is what's right. You know what I mean? To you, what you know, what you've been taught is what's right. And you don't care about anything or anyone but what you think is right. And unfortunately, that happens with a lot of us. But when we're willing to say, hey, I might be wrong, let me consider there is another side to the story other than my own. Yeah. And that's to me, this is just my opinion. This is my humble opinion. That's what I believe is going to really start changing the direction of racism in this country, is us sitting down and being honest about what we like and what we don't like and what we believe is right. Because somebody said that, Blacks don't deserve to own a home in Holland. And it was written into the mortgage contracts, from the 30s. It was someone posted up a mortgage contract on Facebook, and I was reading it, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. And that was right here in Holland. And 1934 was, 80 years ago plus?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't very long ago. And so, and there are still people in their mind that says that same thing today.
Yeah.
I don't want them in my neighborhood. I don't want them in my schools. I don't want them in my grocery store. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a sad commentary, but it's still happening. But again, we have to keep addressing it and hitting it dead on, and then realizing within ourselves there's things that we need to work out.
Amen. I think I asked last time, am I allowed to say that as an atheist?
Well, amen, it simply means so let it be.
There you go. See?
There you go.
Thank you, Christopher, for joining our show this week. It was an amazing Chris trifecta here. So as we wrap the show up, and I'm going to throw this on the spot for you. I'm going to make you feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe it won't be uncomfortable or not. I don't know. But we do something called quick saves. And essentially it's, what is something that you were reading throughout the week and that you saved and want to share with everybody? And it's just a quick, short segment. So I'll go first.
Or even like a TV show or something you saw or whatever too. It doesn't have to be something you read.
It does, and it can be funny, sad, historic, whatever floats your boat. This week, mine was a photo, and I'm just gonna say it because my week was not super awesome at work. So this week, somebody posted a photo and said, the only border wall I support is this wall of border collies. And I have a border collie, and there's a bunch of like little baby border collies creating a wall. And that's awesome because that's the only border wall I support. Otherwise, I say, let everybody come in. But, I just, for me, that was my humor, my takeaway, my feel good for the week.
Well, Christopher, I'll let you stew and think about if you've got one, or give you a few more minutes to think about what you've got. My oldest daughter is 3 years old. She's be turning 4 in October, and she has just beautiful red hair. And if I had, a moment to give a solid, swift kick in the shins to the number of people who've asked me, so where'd the red hair come from? Is that the mailman? Is that the milkman? I would have worn out my steel toe boots by now. But I've heard that men and they carry, basically you have a gene mutation or a part of your genome that is a little bit different, and that is the determination for it. And I found a thing from motherboard.vice.com, and basically researchers discovered this one gene is the MC1R on chromosome 16. That is the one that plays an important part in giving red hair, but there's two pieces of it. And if like I do, I have a little bit of red hair. My facial hair comes in kind of fuzzy red and white or bleached blonde, and it's not a solid beard. And so that's part of the reason, because my wife obviously has the other piece, and we put the two pieces together and we made a beautiful little redhead. And so like this is a nice thing that I can be able to use now, that I can basically say, because I usually say just genetic mutations and something like that, but now I can actually say like MC1R and make people feel weird that I'm just throwing science at their face, and maybe they'll stop doing, essentially questioning my wife's fidelity on a regular basis. Like it's a cool thing to do.
Well, you know what? Well, I just like to piggyback on what you just said about the red hair. It's a guy I work with. He has like blonde hair and a red beard. And I thought, are you dyeing that? You know what I'm saying? I just thought that was a weird combination, but apparently it's his natural color. So there you go. Gave me an answer to that question that I had about him, because I wasn't there.
Well, you can check the description to the show, and it'll be in the links, and you can send the link to the guy or something. Be like, hey man, I know why you got that two-tone thing going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he said he claims it's natural. So I said, okay. But for me, just a fun fact, I guess you guys know about the pyramids in Egypt, correct?
Yeah.
And how history has taught us that basically the pyramids were for the resting place of the pharaohs. Well, I just found out that the great, what is that big one? The largest one. What is it called again? Anyway, I'll think about it.
It's either like the Sphinx or the Great Pyramid of Giza or something like that.
The Great Pyramid of Giza.
Giza, that's it. That's the one. The Great Pyramid of Giza, they've done some research on it, and they're actually finding that they believe that the pyramid was actually used to conduct electricity.
What?
They talked about, yeah, it's very interesting. You could probably just type it in your Google search and it'll come up. But yeah, I was watching a video that they were talking about how there were no bodies found, no mummies found, and also no daddies.
Oh man, you have to have children, because that is a great dad joke.
Right. That's a good one, right? So they didn't find any mummies in the pyramid and the Giza pyramid, and they believe that the stones, they were saying that they weighed from anywhere from 5 tons to 50 tons, and there's like this mortar that's in between the stones that are strong enough to hold those stones up together, so they're even more powerful than the 50-ton stones that's on top of them and in between them. And so they're saying that possibly in Egypt that they used this electricity to gold plate those coffins, those sarcophaguses. That's what they call them, I believe it.
Yeah.
And the only way they could be done is had to be done by electricity. So that's the way they were able to do it. And they used that pyramid to do that. And I thought that was very interesting. And they said there were a couple of coffins basically that they should have had some bodies in, but they were too large to hold a human body. So, and they believe that those were used to conduct the energy as well.
Oh, like chemical battery?
Yeah. Well, they talked about this battery that was also, it's called the Parthian battery. You can look that up. Yeah. We found that in was it in Iraq or somewhere? And just overlooked. It was interesting. They said it was basically a metal pot that they used in a copper tube, and they poured acid on it to conduct power.
They tested it on Mythbusters. It was a pretty cool episode.
Yeah. And so they said that possibly, in their time, they had technologies and knowledge that, was lost over time, kind of like an Atlantis type of situation.
Crazy.
Thought that was very
that's cool. Well, that'll be something that anyone else out there that's hearing this or whatever, you got any more information, and pro, con, yes or no, let us know. That'd be awesome to hear some more about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christopher, for joining us for the conversation tonight. It was a pleasure, as always. Make sure you support Christopher Banks for local state local state representative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm running I'm the Democratic candidate for the House of Representatives here in the 90th district, which is Southern Ottawa County. The gerrymandering proposal will be in place in 2022. So right now we still have these weird lines of jurisdiction, but that will be changing here pretty soon.
Yeah, cool.
So.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us tonight. Cellar Door Skeptics is wrapping up, and again, we enjoyed this conversation. We're glad to be able to have somebody of great presence on our show. Thank you, Chris, so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. With that being said, that was another Cellar Door Skeptics. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode right here every week for you.
Been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources.